Hey guys, it's Sign here, the Hobbies of Man. Once again, today we're doing another review. Today we're looking at Bloodline, which is book 9 in the Cradle series. It's written by Will White. It's published by Hidden Gnome, which is Will White's family's publisher. He made it, and then his family works for him. Pretty similar to Dragon Seal, which is Brandon Sanderson's publisher. Then we have the demographic here, which is adult. Technically, it's like a YA novel. Like, the characters are in their 20s. But first of all, I think that most people that would pick this up would probably be adults. People that liked Naruto growing up and want something else. They're into books. They find this. They end up enjoying it. I don't necessarily think actual teenagers would pick this up, mostly because I don't think teenagers go out of their way to find self-published books on Amazon the same way adults do nowadays, right? I could be wrong about that. In terms of genre, this is a progression fantasy or a cultivation novel. It's a fantasy, of course, and it's a martial arts story. And as the story progresses, it also ends up being a sci-fi story to an extent. There is this group of characters called the Abaddon who have this beautiful eggshell white armor that is made of very special metal, and they have these special robotic beings called presences that help them, right? And so it is still fantasy, but it is very, very, very sci-fi coded, right? Although the characters present themselves as angels or divine beings to the people that they interact with when they're down on planets, right? So very cool. I like it a lot. But there is a certain element of sci-fi as the story progresses further and further, right? In terms of adaptations, it sort of has one. There is an animatic coming, which is basically the storyboard with motion kind of part or stage in the development of an animated series. They did a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe, I can't remember what it was, but they worked with an actual studio, with a guy that knew a lot of people that created a studio, and they were working through making the first book and maybe I think the second book into a movie that they could then ply into turning into a series later on, right? And they're working on that right now. I think later in this year, in the fall, there should be a show, like a single screening of it somewhere in the US, probably in LA, because that's where those sorts of things happen. And then after that, I think it'll be available for us plebs to watch on YouTube. Not sure if that's true or not. That's what I remember. It's been like a year since this happened, so I can't quite remember. Ratings wise, for me, this is like a 4.5 to a 5 out of 5. It really depends on the mood. Right now I would say it's a 5 out of 5, but if you ask me again later, I might say it's less than that, 4.5 or something like that, because it's a really good book. But at this point, I've read it quite a few times. And the more times I read it, the more annoyed I find myself at certain characters and how they interact. Not our main characters. I actually quite like how they, interact with each other and with their world, but rather some of the secondary and tertiary characters that are kind of like the foils to our main cast. I find them kind of more and more annoying every time I read it, because I'm attached to Lyndon, and this book deals with him going back to his home village and interacting with his family, right? And so a lot of that stuff is just kind of grating because it's against our main character, right? So yeah, in terms of premise here, basically the tournament has ended. Someone has become uncrowned, and it's time to deal with the consequences of that. At the same time, the Dreadgods are moving, specifically the Wandering Titan, and it's time to go back to the Hidden Valley in order to save Lyndon's family. This is kind of the goal that Lyndon put on himself at the beginning of the series in the first book, and now it's time to go deal with it, right? At the same time, there's still a lot more left to do because there's 3 more books in the series, and we have to see how this plays out. So that's kind of the premise here. In terms of the plot line, it opens up pretty interestingly with a prologue where we see a lot of the Abaddon plot, the serial plot happening. It's on iteration 246, which I think is supposed to be Sector 24, Planet 6. It's called Commandment, and this is where we see the Vroshir, who are basically the devil characters opposing the Abaddon angel characters, fighting over a world as the world is about to collapse, Suriel arrives and her beautiful golden kind of phoenix, vibe. Actually, I think she's actually blue, not gold, but whatever, it doesn't matter. And rewinds the whole thing. And so the Roshir run away because now the Abaddon are here and this could be bad for them, right? So they go away. Then we transition over to 24/7 or 247, which is called Jester, where we see 6 Silver Lords, which are, I guess they're like the equivalent to Abaddon. So there's like a bunch of different systems playing all at the same time. Silver Lords are like Herald Sage level characters for the Abaddon, bracket of characters, right? And they're bad guys, so they're against the Abaddon, right? And they erode reality just by existing. So Suriel shows up, she bolsters reality by existing, and she is being stretched too thin because too many things are happening in too many iterations. And so she's showing up in all of them, and in each of them she is weaker and weaker as she spreads herself out more and more, right? And so she has to focus on 247 or 246, and that leads to the destruction, or at least the loss of 246 commandment, right? So she saves Jester in order to, or she loses commandment in order to save Jester, which kind of sucks, right? We transition over to the main storyline. Again, we see Mercy babying Pride, who's very annoyed at the treatment because he is a grown man and he doesn't need a sister to take care of him. And she's being too empathetic because that's the whole thing about Mercy, is that she's the odd one out in the Akira family, right? She's too nice, too good of a person compared to everyone else in her family. And Pride is a bit annoyed at this, right? He needs emotional support, not physical support. And, well, he doesn't really want it either way. It's not really working, but Fury arrives to break the tension. They have recently caught Seishin Daji, who last time was the reason why Pride and most of the secondary characters from the Uncrowned tournament that worked for the Akira faction died. And Mercy is forced to be the judge of this trial. And she's not very, excited about this. She actually finds it very difficult for her to do. But it's her job, so she will do what she must, right? And at the same time, Fury tells us that he is ascending. It's time for him to move on from Cradle and to join up with the Abaddon, right? And it is explained to us that he needs to do this in order to maintain balance with the other factions. At the same time, it feels kind of stupid to me to do this. I understand why it happens at a meta level, right? We need to get Fury out of the story so that he doesn't become a problem later, right? But at the same time, in the current situation that we find ourselves in the story, Mercy's team, or the Akira faction, alongside Northstrider, are actually on the losing position, even if they technically won the Uncrowned tournament. And Fury ascending does not actually put them in the best position because Reagan Shen, the other monarch, is probably still going to attack them in some way, right? And so him ascending actually forces the Akiras back onto the back foot, or keeps them at the same level as Reagan Shen, when they really should focus more on being better than him or being at a stronger level than him right now, right? Also, it might actually help them against the Dreadgods, right? So I'm not really sure why this was justified. I understand the idea that balance must be kept between all the factions and that some other factions might attack them, but at the same time, if they will attack you, it's better to have 2 monarchs than 1, right? So it's a bit confusing to me, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference. Later, we see Yeren and Linden on their cloud fortress. They need to leave the city, but the city is not allowing them to, arguing with the 9 Cloud Soul. And, Yeren is like, ram it. And as Linden is about to do that, an Akira member arrives. And this turns out to be Charity, the Sage of the Silver Heart. And she tells him not to leave. She tells Linden that he's a young sage, the Sage of the Twin Stars, and that the Sacred Valley is too dangerous for them right now. The Dread God is coming, but also the powers of all these characters are actually a hindrance to them at this point in time, not a benefit. And that she wants Linden and Yeren, who at this point represent a very powerful faction on their own, to stay with them and learn from her, and I guess from Fury to an extent, although he's leaving, instead of potentially throwing their lives away trying to save people that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, right? But Linden understands that he's, valuable and important, and so he actually forces Charity to accept that he's going to go, and then actually manages to get her to help him by bringing along 12, I think, cloud ships full of Akira family members in order to help him evacuate the Sacred Valley, which is great. Appreciate that. Very fun. And so she will help them get transport down to Sky's Edge after Fury's ascension. Charity then, kind of in a surprise move, tells Linden that he's also a sage now. He can talk to her by her name. He can call her by her name. And this is a little weird for Linden, but at the same time, it's kind of appreciated because it is showing that he has progressed a lot, right? At the same time, because Linden is like low-key a harem protagonist, I thought it was kind of funny where it's like, oh, is Charity trying to get in on that as well, right? Because in the previous book, Charity had told him, hey, do you want to marry Grace? We want you to be part of the Akira family. What do we need to do to make that happen, right? And Linden's like, I'm good. I like Yeren. I don't want anyone else, right? But maybe Charity's like, well, Grace is gone, but we still need to tie him here, and he's pretty powerful and cool. Maybe I can make a move, right? I don't think that's what it was at all, but I thought it'd be kind of funny. So I thought about that, and I laughed, and then I moved on. But that's basically all that happens in this kind of moment here. Later, we get the trial scene. It's pretty cool. It's like a dark room. Basically, no one is visible except Mercy, who is talking to the three people that are accused, which are Meira, I think is her name, Daji, of course, and King Dataka. And King Dataka is trying his best to try to get the blame set on him so that he dies, right? Instead of his son, because he wants his son to survive. He's already lost one. He can't lose the second one. And the whole time, we know that Daji is guilty. We are aware of this for a fact. And yet somehow, he manages to avoid admitting guilt, even though he swore an oath, right? So that means that someone was, using their willpower in order to affect this outcome, which probably is Reagan Shen. At the same time, Daji wants to get out of this situation, and the best way that he can think of to do this is to say that it was Linden who just has a grudge against him, right? Which is obviously not true. And, well, Mercy's like, okay, well, you gotta fight him then. And so Linden annihilates him. He doesn't kill him, but he basically destroys any chance of him ever being relevant ever again, right? And he doesn't kill him because his name is not Mercy, and he knows that death would have been too good for him, and that actually keeping him with the Akiras is actually the worst punishment ever, because they will basically torture him for the rest of his life, and he deserves it. So there you go. Linden is being a little bit vindictive here, and I like that. I think it's kind of nice to see Linden with a bit more of a spine and a little bit of a negative streak there, because he's a very positive person, right? Or, well, not positive, but he's like a very, like, I guess honorable is the right word. I'm not really sure, because he's kind of a little bit of a rat, a little bit of a weasel. He kind of finds ways to win, even though they might not be the best ways to do so. But he's also someone that will not really go out of their way to be cruel or evil, right? And in this case, he decided to be a bit cruel. And I appreciate that kind of subtle differentiation in his character as he grows stronger. I think it's valuable. But I'm not sure if it's good or not. It's just kind of interesting, right? Then we transition over to a new scene. We see that Fury has his ascension party. Linden is gifted the inheritance of Grace's family. So Grace's family was basically pretty low level. I mean, they were, important enough to gain the, the special names for the Akiras, which are all different virtues, right? So her father's name was Ernest, and she was Grace, obviously. But this family was kind of basically, this was their last chance to be relevant. Grace died. Ernest and his wife decided that they're going to go ahead and ascend with Fury as part of his entourage, and so they have no reason to have any of their earthly possessions. Because Lyndon avenged their daughter, he deserves to have their inheritance, and so they give it to him. They thank him profusely for his duty, for what he did, and then they leave, right? And we have this pretty funny moment where Yeren and Fury have that like predator handshake, right? Which is pretty fun. I like that. And then Fury tells Mercy to not fall into the traps of the Akira family politics, right? Of expectations. Specifically, it's about expectations, but it really is about the family politics, right? And then he opens a portal and he ascends, and it turns out that he's going to Serakiel, I think, who is the fox, which is kind of funny because my understanding of it is that the fox is kind of like a it's not a frontline fighter. They're kind of, the secondary or tertiary kind of like characters. Not like the frontliners, like Gadriel and the wolf. What's her name? I can't remember. But I thought that the fox was kind of like more of a behind the scenes kind of group. And that does not fit Fury at all. So I don't know how that works. It's kind of funny. Maybe it's to do with his personality type more so than his abilities or his tendency to want to fight, right? So we'll see how that works out. I don't think it'll ever be explained, to be honest with you. So it is what it is. Then the party has ended, and it's time for Lyndon and Yeren to make their way back to the Sacred Valley. And so Charity readies the portal. She tells them that she has to go first. If the Wandering Titan is there and ready to kill them, she will not let them through. But if he's not, they will pass, right? Lyndon and Yeren talk about his people, about what to do with them. Will they listen? Will they not? It doesn't really matter. They have to go try to save them, right? And both think that the other is going to kill all the Sacred Valley people for being shitty. And they both think that they have to tell the other not to do so. And it's kind of funny. Then Ethan and Zeal show up. They join them. Mercy sneaks onto the ship. And then Charity passes them through the portal. They're clear to continue. They progress. And then while they're passing through, the Titan walks by them, doesn't pay attention to them, but still with his motion destroys one of the Akira cloud ships. And so it's pretty horrifying, just the sheer power that these creatures have, right? They try to fly as quickly as they can back to the Sacred Valley. It's not quite fast enough, but it's kind of interesting that Lyndon feels Orthos growing closer the further into the Sacred Valley he goes. And to distract themselves from what they're having to do, they go walk around the fortress, which is now called Windfall. This is the winnings from the first round of the Uncrowned tournament. It's Lyndon and Yeren's plot turned into one massive ship. And then Ethan, of course, forced his own onto theirs. So it's kind of like the way I imagine it is like a giant square or like a giant rectangle where Lyndon's piece is here, Yeren's piece is here, and then Ethan's attaches to the back, right? Kind of like a Lego set, which I think is pretty fun. And Zeal's ship as well joins them, and he does not attach himself to theirs, but he's there, right? Then as they're going through the air flying towards Sacred Valley, some dinosaur bird things show up, they attack, and the team marks them quite funnily. It's kind of funny to see Yeren just show off her powers and just overwhelming strength, and it's really fun because everyone is like suddenly scared. They're like, oh shit, she should have not done that. It's pretty funny. And she goes to the other ship and she's like, oh, sorry guys, I didn't mean to scare you guys, I was just showing off, right? And then we see some interactions there between the characters to show us the difference between Lyndon's sage abilities, which are kind of spiritual. He affects the outside world with his own will, whereas Yeren's are kind of physical, and so they turn inwards, and then they allow her to exist in the world more exactly, I guess. So it's kind of weird to explain, but basically Lyndon can control things outside of his body, and Yeren controls her body as best as she can. That's basically how I can explain this. It's kind of like I can't think of a good example, but basically Lyndon has the Force, and Yeren just is superhuman. That's kind of what it is, as best as I can explain it. Then we have intermission here. We have the Abaddon explain to us the Mad King. His name was King Daruman. He controlled his world. He became an executor for the Abaddon, which is a group of people that could exist outside of the pact. I guess I can't remember what it was called. I want to say Eldari Pact, but I don't think that that's correct. And they can basically function as Abaddon without the restrictions that the Abaddon have. And so this allowed them to do things that they maybe shouldn't have been able to do. And it eventually drove all of them crazy, except for Daruman, who eventually had to absorb an evil spirit, merge with it, and then he kind of did Anakin falling to the dark side type shit, which is pretty cool. Mostly it was because of the Hound, to be honest with you. Machiel is actually kind of like the guy that's supposed to be the ultimate good guy, that's actually kind of like the ultimate bad guy, and I kind of like that. I think it's fun. We return to the main story. We see that Mount Samara is signaling their arrival to the Sacred Valley. They can finally see it. They rush in. The Golds try to catch up, but they're kind of slow. So Lyndon is kind of has a lot of time to just kind of realize that he's in the Sacred Valley and understand that his worldview, that his where he comes from was just the bottom of the barrel. He came from the weakest, shittiest little place, and it's kind of funny for him to realize that and just be like, oh, like, ew. So I thought it was kind of interesting. But I don't know if many people like that. I think it's kind of cool that we see, because you would expect this to be a triumphant return, right? And Will White doesn't really play that way at all. He really makes it kind of like a shitty, like, oh God, why am I back here kind of concept. And I like that. I think it's great. They step through the barrier. Yaren immediately is affected. Apparently her soul is imbalanced due to her advancement. And as they go further in, it seems to not get worse for her, which is good. They reach Heaven's Glory School. They go to the outpost at the Ancestor's Tower. They destroy it, the Ancestor's Tomb. They destroy it, and then when Lyndon is kind of telling Yaren, do you want to trace back your master's steps? She's like, no, we got to focus on saving your people first. We'll do this later. And some Irons arrive and they try to attack them. They manage to intimidate them into submission. They gather some information. They learn about these exiles in Sacred Valley that attack the Heaven's Glory School. And then Elder Rom arrives. Now, if you guys remember, Elder Rom is the character who initially interacted with Lyndon in Heaven's Glory, the guy that Lyndon ultimately kind of betrays in order to escape with Yaren out into the real world, right? And this guy is quite angry at Lyndon returning. And it's kind of funny because you would assume that, oh, this guy left and he came back. He must be pretty powerful by this point, right? But I just think that it's kind of, that these people just don't understand that the way that the world works in Sacred Valley is like completely wrong compared to the world works outside of Sacred Valley. And it's just kind of funny to see them kind of constantly act a certain way that just is completely unjustified. It's also kind of annoying. Like you just like, the more you read through this book, you're like, dude, come on, stop being so fucking stupid, right? Like, Lyndon, just kill everyone, like, get rid of them, like, they're clearly not worth your time, right? So Elder Rom is kind of like the first kind of character that we meet that really shows us this concept, right? Then they gather some more information, and as more Heaven's Glory arrive, they all settle down. They go to the treasure hall, and then they learn that the enemy that the Heaven's Glory is fighting against is a giant black turtle. Lyndon rushes away in order to go find him, and as this is happening, we transition over to Ortho's point of view, where we see that him, Kelsa, Jay Chen, and Jay Long are actually trying to fight off a bunch of Heaven's Glory characters who are attacking them, because Orthos and Kelsa and Jay Chen and Jay Long managed to save Kelsa's mother, or Lyndon's mother, from Heaven's Glory, right? Because she was previously trapped by them. And Lyndon arrives just in the nick of time. He saves Kelsa from being stabbed through by a flying sword, and he whips it back at the guy that was controlling it and kills them immediately. Very cool. And throughout this, Lyndon just kind of shows off in a great way, and then he creates his dragon void dance, and it looks awesome, and it scares the shit out of everyone. And then ultimately Lyndon turns to his sister and bows and apologizes for not being there for her, and she accepts his apology. She hugs him. She starts crying. And this is kind of like not a triumphant return, but a meaningful return. This is kind of like what you would expect going forward, and this is not what we get at all. But at least this moment is sweet and nice and meaningful, and it's valuable for both Lyndon and Kelsa, and I appreciate that. And then we get another Abaddon intermission here. We see that the Mad King has a scythe like Osriel. He recounts an old story of failure, and then how Osriel beat him, and now how he has the scythe, and so he is the Reaper, not Osriel anymore, and that he will go and destroy the Abaddon and the order, right, in the world, actually in the universe, and hopefully this will change things for the better, right? We return to the main story where we see Jaelong and Jay Chen. They want to leave, but they're not being allowed to by the, what's it called, the Leaf School. Let's see, what is their name? Fallen Leaf School. And Lyndon finds them. There's a little bit of a small confrontation there, but it works out. Then Orthos is being healed. The boys are chatting. Ethan forces Lyndon to practice his sage skills, and he learns that he can use his authority to do stuff he can do normally, and anything that is related directly to his sigil or his icon is easier to do than other things, right? And so the way they test this is by using a cup of water. If you fill the cup of water, that goes against his icon, so it's very hard for him to do. He can do it, but it's very difficult. But if he empties the cup, which is in line completely with his icon, it is deeply easy to do, right? And so there are things that he's better at depending on his relationship with the icon, right? Really cool. Then the team gets draws to assign them duties. Lyndon and Urien will go to the Wei clan. Orthos and Blue will go to the Fallen Leaf School. Ethan will go to Heaven's Glory. Mercy will go to the Lee clan. And Zeal will go to the Kazans, right? And it's kind of interesting because these characters kind of line up, right? Like Orthos and Blue going to Fallen Leaf. You know, the nature spirits go to the, nature-based school. That's cool. Ethan stays at Heaven's Glory because that's where his abilities are probably most useful. Mercy goes to the Lee clan because she likes her name. Very Asian sounding, kind of like the Akuras. And of course, Zeal goes to the Kazans because he and the Kazans kind of have a similarity in the way that they use their powers, right? They're all about solidness and strength and kind of like, being kind of... stiff is the wrong word, but like resolute, right? The Kazan clan are kind of like earthbenders, right? And Zeal is not an earthbender, but he does use force and kind of like the same conceptual kind of ideas. And Zeal actually has a really easy time convincing them to leave. Mercy is mostly ignored, and Ethan takes control sort of well, but then he gets betrayed by Elder Rom. He does offer the J siblings a place to live with him, basically trying to develop the sect that Lyndon hopefully will lead, right? Through them, which is pretty interesting. However, they deny his request and they decide to leave on their own. Lyndon arrives at the Wei clan kind of region, I guess, and immediately is treated badly by an iron at the gate. And Lyndon proves the point. It doesn't quite work, and he gets caught by a script. He breaks it because it hurts Yeren. And then they meet with Monteris again, who is the character that we initially see leave Lyndon, fight a tree at the beginning of the story, back in Unsold. And they have an interaction there that Lyndon is kind of, interested by. The fact that his cousin still had a life when, they were basically probably going to die soon, and he had a daughter, and his life was very different from Lyndon's. And yet he finds some, benefits to this, or some happiness in the fact that his cousin has had a nice life. But his cousin does not give a shit about him. So, it's whatever, right? Lyndon is then attacked again. It's kind of a ploy here. And they attack him. It doesn't work. Again, Lyndon finally manages to make it up to the elders. And he brings them news that obviously they don't give a shit about. They don't believe him. They think that he used the fog stream in order to show them visions that are not true, even though Lyndon clearly does not need to do that. And they just initially don't listen to him. And then somehow they do. because he basically like hockey bursts them. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but he basically uses his spiritual pressure in order to force them to listen to him. They do, they mobilize, and then Heaven's Glory shows up as they're kind of traveling to their gate. And again, this is another ploy, is another attack. The Wei Clan joins up with the Heaven's Glory, and they throw a barrier around Linden and Yaren. It uses Gold Steel, which deeply affects Yaren. She tries to hide in a void space. It doesn't work. Then she tries to use the Moonlight Bridge. It also doesn't work. And Linden burns through. Yaren manages to escape, but then Linden and Dross have to use the White Fox Path to beat the Elders, and they do it very, very well. It's kind of unclear how Linden can use the White Fox Path, because he cannot take the Madra into his body. He can still mold it, I guess, and I don't know if that's because of his familiarity with it, because of Dross, who basically is a sacred artist as well, to an extent, or if it's because he's just that much more powerful than them. I'm not quite sure. But I know that he cannot take the Madra into himself, so that would affect his path, right? That would affect his body, so he can't do that. But he can still manipulate it to an extent, I guess, using Soulfire. It's kind of unclear how that works. But he manages to do it thanks to Dross's help, and they beat the Patriarch's ass. They beat the First Elder as well, and then he forces them into exile. By using his authority, he forces them to walk towards the Dreadgods. So hopefully, I assume that they're dead, right? The sky changes color, and it turns gold because the Dread Beast is here, the Wandering Titan. Ethan has to fight the Heaven's Glory School, and then Mercy is forced to beat the Lee clan into submission so they will listen to her. And she gets really upset at herself for doing this malice-like behavior, basically. She is deeply, deeply disgusted, but also it's what she had to do, and it is for the best in this case. So she's kind of upset about that. Zeal saves as many of the Kazan clan as he can, but it's never enough. Yaren manages to go to Orthos in blue. They tell her that Linden is okay. He doesn't feel hurt. He just feels sad. She bridges away to Malice, and she tells her to save her from the Dreadgod. This is what she wants as her reward for being the uncrowned king, or queen as it were. And the monarchs are like, no, we can't do that. We're not going to. What we can do instead is give you more power by fixing your spiritual imbalance. She gets upset about this because she's basically being forced to accept a gift that she's not asking for. But at the end of the day, it is actually the best for her anyways. And so she accepts the proposal. She gets fixed. And then Malice helps her anyways, because Malice was just proving a point to Yaren. And they go off to fight the Titan. Reagan Shen reawakens the Bleeding Phoenix, which is a problem, but he's a bit of an asshole anyway, so whatever. He uses a Hunger Madra infused hand, which is weird. I'm not really sure what that's about. Actually, I do know, but for the sake of this review, it's kind of unclear, right? Because I've read through the 10th book already as well, so I know a little bit about it, right? And he talks about this character called Subject 1, which apparently is the father of other Dreadgods, or the first Dreadgod, and it's, I guess, where this hand comes from. Linden controls the Wei clan again. He kind of feels a bit horrified at the approaching Titan. They make it to the Heaven's Glory, and he goes to save Ethan. And as he does so, the Titan moves in. They rush to leave the Sacred Valley, and they manage to make it to Windfall. He lets his family in, and a bunch of refugees, mostly from the Lee clan apparently. They fly up, they see the Titan eating the Kazan clan's home, and he returns to Windfall. They fly away. Suddenly, Malice appears with Yaren in tow. They manage to land the refugees in the Desolate Lands, or the Desolate Wilds, sorry. They fly back for more when Malice starts shooting the Titan, and her arrows lose power as they cross the boundary field into Sacred Valley. As they fly back, Yaren joins them, and his family talk to her. She polishes him up a little bit, and his sister and his mom realize, oh, they're like into each other. And they kind of play with that for a little bit. They kind of mess with Yaren a bit, but also they're appreciative of her. And they arrive back at the edge of the Sacred Valley. Mercy shows up again, and then as Malice pulls the Titan away, the Phoenix shows up. You know, everyone says, fuck, it sucks. and North Strider shows up to fight after he was beating up the Abyssal Palace, which are the people that work for the Wandering Titan, right? He goes to Sacred Valley. He's very mad at the fact that every single one of the most important characters in our story are here. He's like, dude, why would Malice allow the youngest sage, the fucking first pseudo herald, and then a bunch of very talented characters to just be here where they might die very easily? Like, dude, this is wasteful, right? He gets mad about that, but, you know, it is what it is. Zeal and the Kazans suffer an attack from Bloodspawn. He starts to escape on his own, and then throughout his monologue about, you know, justifying his escape, he actually realizes that he didn't escape at all, that he's been fighting the Bloodspawn the whole time. He comes back properly. He helps the Kazan clan defeat the Bloodspawn, and then they move on to try to get away. Linden empty palms Yeren in order to force her to lose connection to the Phoenix. But that doesn't really work. The Phoenix is very, very attached to Yeren because it is the second most powerful, you know, blood user type thing in the area, right? After North Strider, but North Strider is not connected to the Bleeding Phoenix. His blood mantra is completely separate. Yeren's is definitely connected to the Bleeding Phoenix. North Strider saves them. Then Malice pulls them away from the gods. She forces the Dreadgods to go north, and then she grabs Windfall and basically throws it back to Moongrave. She actually uses a portal, but she grabs the ship and then, like, you know, forces it away. And so the battle for Sacred Valley has ended. Linden believes he failed, but he has saved a ton of people anyways, so he actually really succeeded. It's just not the way that he thought, right? And mostly I think he's angry at himself because he thought that he was going to come back a conquering hero, and he ended up just being the same loser he always was at Sacred Valley, but now he has to bully people into submission. And they do listen to him, but not because they respect him or love him, but rather because they're afraid of him. And he doesn't like this. It makes him feel bad, right? And I understand that. It's very, very meaningful. And I think it's very fair for Linden to feel the way he does. It's really shitty of his, you know, extended family to treat him this way, because he is the most important member of their clan, basically. He is like the guy, right? So they just can't realize that because they're stuck in their stupid kind of concept, right? Then Mercy offers a way back to Sacred Valley. Linden prays to Suriel for guidance, and she answers. She shows up and she has a conversation with Linden. She tells him, hey man, I already saved Sacred Valley. You just did. Linden tells her, you know, I didn't save everyone. She's like, yeah, that happens. This is the cost of trying to save people, is that you can never save all of them, right? She shows him possible futures. He realizes that he must advance, right? Always. That is what he does, right? That is his revelation. And when he comes back to normal, he ups his soul fire and he forces himself to go to Overlord with the revelation that I advance, right? Orthos decides to do the same for Underlord, and then Linden returns to Sacred Valley alone, actually forcing his friends to watch him disappear. Then Jay Chen and Jay Long see him arrive, and they see him show up kind of the same way that Linden saw Suriel show up in Unsold. He arrives, he has beautiful light all around him, and he looks like he's, you know, pushing himself with wings of light. This is what Jay Long sees, which is the way that Linden describes Suriel. And very awesome. I love this. I think this is really cool. And Jay Long is like, I believe that he is the Sage of the Twin Stars. Very cool. We have another Abaddon intermission. Here happens at Oasis. Suriel and Machiel join forces to fight the Mad King. And they have a very interesting fight. As they get ready to strike him down, fate shifts, and actually what happens is that the Titan, or the Mad King, gets to leave, and Machiel is the one that is hurt, and he's injured, and this is bad for everyone, right? Linden sees the Titan back in the main storyline. We request a battle plan. He tries attacking, but it doesn't work. It fizzles out, right? Linden is all alone, but rather soon his friends show up. Linden, Yeren, and Nathan attack the Dreadgod. It mostly fails. The Dragon Descends is awesome but useless, and the Dragon Descends is basically his Chidori technique. So he forges a gauntlet out of Black Flame Madra. He infuses his authority as a Void Sage on it, and he creates this awesome black gauntlet, and he uses it. It's very similar to Chidori or Rasengan. It kind of has that vibe, right? But it has a different look to it, and he uses it. Very awesome, completely useless. Dross is, upset that Linden doesn't want to leave. He asks Linden, will you leave me behind if I stop working? Linden says no. And he's like, okay, that's all I needed to hear. He creates a battle plan. He spreads his, self across a lot of different people. And he shares this plan with everyone on the team. Zeal has to create speed up rings. Mercy and Orthos have to wrestle the Titan into a position that they need him to be in. Linden will consume as much of it as he can once Yaren and Ethan support him. And when they get information out of this, Dross Fox streams it, and it forces it to leave. And the thing is that Dross using the Fox stream actually breaks him, and Dross is no longer with us. He is not dead per se, but he is not there either, which is a big shame. Basically, Linden had to sacrifice his friend in order to save his town. The thing is that at this point, it's kind of like a stupid sacrifice, because what was the point? You already saved all the people. I guess Linden wanted to save the region as well from devastation, but maybe Dross was too high of a price to pay for that desire, right? So it's kind of unclear. Linden will have to figure that out on his own. The team regroups. Dross is lost. And then we have another Abaddon transmission, this time from Sanctum, where Suriel updates the judges. There's a contingency plan, protect the Central Worlds. Cradle is out of bounds from this edict, and so Cradle will fall for a while. Cradle is significant to the Abaddon because that's where the original ones come from, but it is not necessarily the center of the universe, and so they will allow it to fall under Roshir control, but they will eventually go back and get it for themselves, right? And she sends Linden a message. She says, hold on. Back in the main story, the team regroups again. Ethan is a bit of a mummy. He gets his hair cut. Mercy and Seal are sleeping, trying to heal. Linden and Yaren are mostly okay. Orthos is sucking up life aura, trying to heal, but he's in a massive size because he can't turn back into his normal size. In the Desolate Wilds, Ye Chen is establishing the Twin Star Sect in order to protect herself from a bunch of J Clan members that just randomly showed up. And then they're allowed to stay with them because they have the backing of a sage. Malice and North Strider talk, and Shen sneaks into the labyrinth, which is concerning, right? The epilogue sees Linden go to the Ancestor's tomb and interact with Elder Whisper, who is the original creator of the Fox Dream, or the White Fox Path, right? He talks with him, and it turns out that they were hiding, or Whisper was hiding away in this area and holding open a space in, space-time, I guess. He was holding up a void space, and it turns out that it was the Sword Sages. And Whisper tells Linden that this is important because within it, there's something that will help him kill the Dreadgods. And it turns out to be this little box that when you open it has another Madra hand in it, and this is very concerning. And the box, of course, has the Aurelius logo on it, or the family crest, I guess. And this is where the book ends. And it was a great, great book. I really, really enjoyed it. A lot of fun. The first time I read this, a few months ago, maybe a year ago, maybe at this point, I'm not really sure. It should have been a few months ago. I really liked it. I still really like it. I think it's a very good book. However, I can understand why a lot of people seem to not like this book very much. The return to Sacred Valley should have been this great, glorious moment where Linden comes back. He's immediately accepted. He is loved by his peers. He shows up and his family is in awe of him, right? And his sister is, but everyone else still treats him the same way. And Linden is deeply upset about this. And I actually think that this is pretty realistic. I think that Will did the right choice. The thing is that is not necessarily a cathartic or satisfying kind of way to do it. At the same time, it is entirely necessary because otherwise there would be no conflict in the story. And this is supposed to be the part of the story where we're dealing with our characters' feelings and emotions as they transition over to being these top tier characters, right? And I think it's valuable that this happened. I can just see how a lot of people don't like it. I really find it to be good though. So yeah, in terms of characters here, well, the stations get their due. Mercy constantly struggles with her duties. And it's not actually her duties because she thinks that she should do them and she appreciates doing them. She thinks that it's important to support her family, but she doesn't like that her duties force her to act like her mother. She is deeply upset about this. She doesn't believe that she has it in her to be that sort of callous, type of character that Malice is, right? And she's kind of upset about it the whole time, right? Lyndon learns about the Void Icon and its powers. He learns that the unsold thing actually doesn't mean unsold. It means void, right? It means emptiness. And that relates to the Void Icon. And he learns about his powers. Yeren is a very powerful character at this point, but she did have that imbalance throughout her time in the book, and she did manage to get that healed. So hopefully going forward, she will be quite powerful, right? The Mad King Daruman is introduced. He is two beings in one. Daruman, of course, and Othkimeth or something like that. Basically, a devil and a good man that was king become one person, and they become this crazy, like Thanos-esque character. Very cool. Lyndon and Orthos reunite, which is beautiful. I loved it. I thought it was great. It's also kind of nice because Lyndon has a family. He just doesn't realize that it's not his original family. It's, Orthos and Little Blue and Yeren and Nathan and all these people, right? And he does realize it, but he doesn't articulate it directly, right? We see Jay Chen and Jay Long again. I actually really like Jay Chen. I think Jay Long is kind of funny because he's also prejudiced in the same way that the Sacred Valley people are, but in a way that's kind of stupid because every time he realizes he's wrong, he still continues to be wrong about something else. But he has a different, outlook on it than Sacred Valley. Because the Sacred Valley people are prejudiced because they believe that they're right and that their way of life is the only way. Whereas Jay Long is prejudiced because he can't see how anyone would act in a different way from how he would act, or how other people that he knew in the J clan would act, which is completely opposite of how Lyndon would act, right? He's afraid that Lyndon will, have a grudge against him. And then when that turns out to not be true, he doesn't understand why it's not true. And then when he thinks that Lyndon is probably barely an underlord, he doesn't realize that Lyndon is actually a sage. And then when it's shown that he is an underlord, he doesn't believe that he's a sage. And then when it's shown that he's a sage, he doesn't understand why Lyndon would care for him. And it's like, dude, because he's not a shitty person, and you just don't understand that because everyone that you've ever interacted with was shitty, right? So I think it's kind of interesting. I like the different way that all these characters work, right? We see a lot of the Sacred Valley people again. Kels is the most important one. Yaron is Lyndon's dad, and Seisha is his mother. And his mother really struggles. She has PTSD in this, and it's not very explored, but it is important that we remember that this is what happened to her, that she has this, right? And of course we meet Elder Whisper again, and some of the other elders, but they're all kind of shitty anyways. Whisper's the only one that's good, and he's not really good either. He's just kind of interesting, right? In terms of world building, we learned that sages basically follow a spiritual ascension. They have power over the world. Heralds follow a physical ascension path. They have power over self. In order to be a monarch, you have to have both. We learn about the Vroshir and the Silver Lords. So the Vroshir is the group organization name. It's basically demon characters, right? And the Silver Lords are a class within that are at a certain level, right? I'm not sure what level they are. Is the Mad King a Silver Lord? I don't think so. I think he's above that, right? And we learned that the Abaddon exists, that they're judges. The top 7 are called judges. Everyone else is just an Abaddon. And of course, there's 7 plus Osriel. So the court of 7 or 8, right? Kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that, right? And the universe is split into sectors, which is basically galaxies, I guess, and they're all centered around one kind of world that adds order every time that people learn how to harness the energies that make up the way, right? Sacred Valley is a field that hides the labyrinth from the Dreadgods, and there's 5 of them, not 4. And subject 1 is the original one. It controls the labyrinth, and it is Hunger Mantra incarnate, right? In terms of artwork and fan service, there's no artwork, there's no fan service. There should be artwork added into this collection that I have eventually, because the new hardcovers have just released, and those have artwork in them, but I'm not sure when that will happen. Eventually, the 3-in-1 collection that is the Way of Lords, or something like the Path of Lords, should have artwork in it. Ratings wise, a 5 out of 5. Like I said, it's great, but the more that you read this, the more you grow to hate the Sacred Valley people, and the more grating they become. And as they become more grating, some of the enjoyment kind of loses out to that irritation, right? So, like I said, 4.5 to 5 out of 5. In this moment, I think it's a 5 out of 5 because I'm really appreciating it. In another moment, or while I'm reading it, it might be less than that, but it's never going to be less than a 4. I think that Will White really struck gold with this. I think that he did a great job with how he managed this, and I really liked it. So yeah, there you go. Those are my thoughts here on Bloodlines, book 9 in the Cradle series. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will have a book chatter episode to go along with this trio of books, and then hopefully I'll get around to reviewing book 10 here in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys later.